So we're going to start with chapter 5 of the book of Genesis. This is the book of the generations. Now, most translations say of man, because the Hebrew is Adam. English is Adam. And often it's called Ha-Adam, the Adam. And I want to hold off translating that because we get into a great deal of trouble and we miss the point of the story if right away we want to translate that. So if we just take it, this is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day when God created Adam, in the likeness of God, he made him. Male and female created he them. And he blessed them and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. So right away, are we talking about a guy named Adam? Well, not according to that story. According to that story, we got a man and a woman, and their name is Adam. These are the generations of the heavens and earth when they were created in the day that the eternal God made earth and heavens. Eternal is a word I read instead of what normally is translated Lord. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, everything is in stasis. You get an idea of what consciousness was like several thousand years ago. All this is storytelling. Way before it gets written down, this is storytelling. Every herb of the field before it grew, for the eternal God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not Adam to work the earth. So a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground, and the eternal God formed, and this is Ha-Adam, the Adam, from the dust of the ground and breathed into, and it says his. You got a problem in Hebrew, because Hebrew doesn't have a neuter. So there's no way of saying it. Everything in the universe is either masculine or feminine in all the Semitic languages. You don't get neuter until you get to Greek and then Latin and then English. One of the advantages of having everything be masculine and feminine is that there's no automatic separation between different levels of creation. When you talk about God, well, God would have his and her just like everything else has his and her. The Greek notion was God can be it. So there's a split between the natural world and the supernatural world. There's a split between animal life and the divine. And the eternal God planted a garden eastward in Eden. Eden actually is a Hebrew word that means pleasure. And there he put the Adam, whom he had formed. And out of the ground the eternal God made every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is drama. I mean, look, you know what's going to happen. I mean, it's a setup. It's like, okay, we're sitting around a fireplace. The storyteller's telling a story. Amazing thing about storytellers is there's two functions in human society that can be filled either by men or women. You know which the two they are? One is a storyteller, the other is a healer. Because neither of them really are degrees. You know, in primitive cultures, if you're able to heal, you're a healer. If you're able to tell stories, you're a storyteller. You know, if you sit and talk and people are there to listen, you're a storyteller. You know, if you stand and talk, there's nobody there. Maybe you're a healer, I don't know. And the eternal God took Adam and put him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. Now remember, this is still Adam. This is the same Adam that was created before. How was Adam created? Masculine and feminine, Adam is created. And the eternal God commanded the Adam, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Now, we're dealing with myth, okay? And myth deals in a world that's very hard for us to rationally allow. I mean, rationally, okay, there's a tree in the garden you better not eat of because you're going to die. What's the question? What's die? I mean, right? This is the first person. This is the first human. You're going to die. Oh, okay. There's something missing here. But it's not like that. Myth doesn't operate like that. You know, because everybody who's listening to the story knows exactly what that means. And everybody who's listening also knows what happens when you tell somebody you can eat everything except that tree. Now, wouldn't you suspect that if God has any kind of brains at all, God would know that too? And the eternal God said, "It is not good that the Adam should be alone. I will make for him," the Adam, "a fitting helper." How did he get alone? Created Adam, male and female, created he them. Here's the Adam in the garden, alone. So out of the ground, the eternal God formed every beast of the field, every bird of the air, and brought them to the Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called every living creature, that was its name. And the Adam gave names to all the cattle, to all the birds of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a fitting helper. And the eternal God made the Adam fall into a deep sleep, and he slept. Now here's one of the major problems. He took what? He took one of his ribs. Tselah is the Hebrew word. And so for a long time they thought the man had one less rib or the woman had one less rib, you know, because of this transfer. But another translation of the word is side. He took one of the Adam's sides and closed up the flesh in its place, and the side which the eternal God had taken from the Adam, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. And this is one of the places where Adam, it's still the word Adam, but now we're talking, it has to be understood as a man. Here comes the woman to a man. And the Adam said, "This now is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken from man." And you know how that works in English? Yeah. Well, in a strange kind of way, it works the same in Hebrew. In Hebrew, the word for man is ish, and the word for woman is isha. Now, what happened? What happened? What do you mean? God took the side of the man, fashioned it into a woman, brought her to the man who looks at her and says, "This is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone." If you take that seriously, literally, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Why? Because she was already there. Where was she? They were attached side by side. Why couldn't they meet each other? Because they were attached side by side. If you're attached side by side, you can't have a relationship where somebody is over against you. So there had to be some notion that the first Adam was created masculine and feminine, a two-sex being. And the man is finally anesthetized. The woman is cut off. What was joined is now unjoined, presented front-wise, and it's like, oh. And then you get a remarkable statement. "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh." I'm convinced that this is one of the places that really reflects the storyteller's setting, because it really doesn't fit in the story. It's like an additional comment put in at some point by a storyteller, and then it's told again the next time it's told. Now that line is in. So I'd be convinced that the storyteller is telling this story to a community, and somebody in the community is going to get married tomorrow. And so he looks at them and he says, therefore, a man and a woman, and they get married and they become one flesh. It's like a little sermon in the middle of a story. And then we get back to the story. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. The word that's used for naked is arumim. Arumim is plural because it's they. You know, the storyteller is just saying this. The man and his woman were arumim. And then he says, now the serpent was more subtle, this is the English translation, was more subtle than any beast of the field which the eternal God had made. But the Hebrew word for subtle is arum. So the people who are hearing this story are hearing a whole other story than that which we hear when it's told in English. Because when it's told in English, we don't get any linkage between the serpent in Hebrew here is nachash, between the nachash and the people. But there's some kind of hookup. What is this hookup? What is this word? The serpent was more arum than any beast of the field. What? More naked? More open? And he said to the woman, so, God has said that you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. This is so psychologically sound. I mean, he doesn't say, so I heard you can't eat of that tree. No, he says, so you can't eat all the trees you can't eat. Yeah. And the woman said to the serpent, we can eat of the fruit of the tree. But the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Now this is very interesting. First of all, it proves the notion that they were together side by side. Because otherwise, she wasn't there yet to hear God say that. And we've got no indication that the man told her this. So the premise is they both heard this. No, she says, you shall not eat of it, the tree in the midst of the garden, nor shall you touch it. Did God say you shouldn't touch it? So first the Nachash exaggerates, and then she exaggerates. Everybody's hedging around here. And the serpent says to the woman, you shall not surely die. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, you shall be as God, knowing good and evil. Now this is really interesting because this is a description of a consciousness that is called godly, which apparently was lacking to the man and the woman in the Garden of Eden. If you don't know good and evil, you don't know distinctions. What is the land of distinctions? The land of distinctions is this level of consciousness. This level where we walk around is the land of distinctions. Every light has its shadow. Every up has its down. Every hard has its soft. Every easy has its difficult. You know, this is the land of distinctions. Good and evil is just a way of indicating all possible distinctions. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food is it tastes good, feels good. It's a physical positive. And that it was pleasant to the eyes is emotional. It's delightful. Delightful. Look at this tree. And desired to make one wise. Whoa. She ate. And she gave also to her husband, literally to her man with her, and he ate. Hey, honey. Hungry? Why? What do you have in mind? Well, there's this fruit. Oh no, we were told not to eat that fruit. No. She eats, she gives it to him, he eats. They go, uh-oh. The eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were arumim. They knew that they were, it's translated naked. But there is some kind of link up between the consciousness of the Nachash, the consciousness of the serpent, and the consciousness that they had awakened to. The Nachash was the only Arum creature around until the man and woman ate of the Aruming fruit, and then they are Arum. What a marvelous thing. If you eat of this tree, you'll be like God. Oh. I mean, can you imagine saying, no, thank you? And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. What was the fruit they ate? Where possibly do you see any indication that it's an apple? Other than the fact that apples don't grow in that part of the world. One of the things I love about this is that it's a way of exposing some of the stories that we just have accepted as part of what it is. And we see it even though it's not there. People read this story and they're still sure it's an apple. The story tells us what kind of fruit it is. It just told us. There's only one kind of tree mentioned. Fig. Think about the fig. This is very, I hope you guys are over age, because the fig can't be talked about in a mix, with people too young. Has anybody had a fig tree? You take figs, those ripe figs, when you take them off and you bite into it and you look into that fruit, it's embarrassing. It's gorgeous. Do you know? This is a deeply sexual fruit. This is a deeply sexual story. And they heard the voice of the eternal God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the eternal God among the trees. Actually, the Hebrew says, betoch eitz hagan, in the midst of the tree of the garden. And the eternal God called to the Adam and said to him, Ayaka, where are you? It's great. It's great. Because whatever your conception of God is, and this is really a mythical, anthropomorphic vision of God. But wouldn't God know where he is? There's a Hasidic statement. This is from 18th century teachers. God says to every person, just as God said to Adam, where are you? Where are you now in the life that you've been living? Where are you is like a wake-up call. And the man said, I heard your voice in the garden and I was afraid because I was a roam, because I was naked. It's got to be more than just naked. Like the people who are telling this story are not namby-pamby people. They're people who live in communal settings. Just to be without one's clothes is just not that big of a deal. I was afraid because I was a roam and I hid myself. And God said, who told you that you were a roam? Translate what? Who told you that you were naked? Who told you that you were awake? Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you not to eat? Again, God is playing. This is much more playful. If you really think about what's been done to this story and what's been done to us in the name of the story, this story is playful. And the man said, this is just perfect. God says, did you eat of the tree? And the man says, the woman who you gave me It's not my fault. And the eternal God turns to the woman and says, so what have you done? And the woman said, the serpent. The serpent beguiled me and I ate. And the eternal God said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon your belly. Tradition is that the middle word of the whole Torah, of the 5 books of the Torah scroll, happens to be the word gachon, belly. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. So apparently, the Nachash didn't look like a snake before. So one might imagine, snakes, a snake is one of the most incredible beings. A snake scares us, a snake in the grass. But a snake is also a symbol of the Ouroboros. The symbol of the snake with its tail in its mouth, the circle? The snake is a symbol of eternality, of eternal life. The snake, what do you call it? Not molts. Molts. It sheds its skin, it walks out of its skin, and it's new. And what ancient peoples thought was that's reborn. Like the snake holds the secret of rebirth. And what else is the snake? The snake is the caduceus. The snake is on the symbol of healing of the American Medical Association. So it's there with us all the time. The snake is an incredible symbol. It's also a phallic symbol. So what is going on here? There's no other animal that could serve the function of this. And what's the question it answers? How come the snake doesn't have any feet? Here's why. Snake used to have feet, because apparently, that we have these pictures where the snake's twining around the tree, offering. It couldn't be. Because according to the myth, before this, the snake was not that. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. It shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise its heel. This is simply describing the situation that the people discover themselves in with respect to snakes. And to the woman he said, I will greatly multiply the pain of your childbearing. In sorrow you shall bring forth children, and your desire shall be to your husband, and he shall rule over you. This needs white out, the last couple of words. I think there are a couple words missing, actually. He shall think he rules over you. And to the man he says, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree, which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake, in sorrow shall you eat of it all the days of your life, thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face shall you eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. And here's the biggest clue and the biggest sadness for me in the normal translation of this. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all the living. Okay. In Hebrew, the word is chava. Chava is a form of the verb chaya, which means living thing, which is a form of chai, which is life. Okay. Get this with the story. We're in the garden. We're told we can eat of all the trees of the garden, except for the knowledge of good and evil. Then somebody who is arum and wants us to be arum, or gives us the choice of being arum, says, hey, take a look at the tree. Look at this fruit. The woman looks at it, has to be the woman. And I'll tell you why, but it's only a woman's consciousness who could have done this. The woman looks at it and sees that it's good on all levels. It's good physically, emotionally, and mentally, which are the levels of this, our life. And she eats and she gives it to her husband, and their eyes are open. Now, one would expect that the man would turn to his wife and say, your name is mud. If the story is as we've thought it's been, wouldn't he would not turn to her and say, therefore your name is life. That's what he names her. He says, your name is life because you're the mother of all the living, which is to say, your act of taking that fruit allows all this to be. For Adam and his wife, the eternal God made coats of skins and clothed them. Remember, they tried to clothe themselves with sewing together fig leaves. Now, the image you have in your head, you're going to have to dispense with, because the image we have in our head is they're in bodies and they're trying to cover their private parts with the leaves. And that has nothing to do with it. They have awakened to their individuation from a non-individuated state, and they need to differentiate themselves as physical beings. And they try to do it by putting leaves around them, but leaves don't fit because we're not trees. We're animals. So God gives skins, and once again, what kind of skins? A bear skin? No. This is the skin. God gives us skin. And then the eternal God said, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also from the tree of life and eats and lives forever. Apparently the tree of life was not something you ate once of and you lived forever. You had to keep taking it. And the eternal God sent him out from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from where he was taken. There's something missing, but this is the way the text is as we receive it. So he drove out the man and placed the cherubim. Cherubim sounds a lot like cherub. Some kind of angel, not a sweet, fat little angel. East of the garden, and a flaming sword which turned every which way to guard the way to the tree of life. And Adam knew Chava, his wife, and the Hebrew word know, yada, is a kind of intimate knowing. And she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man with the help of the eternal. Okay, where's the punishment? Where's the fall of man? I mean, isn't this what the story's about? The story, it's a magnificent. Why do we die? We die because we chose it. Why is it hard to grow things? Why does it hurt a woman to have children, and yet she desires to have children? It's not punishment, it's choice. Because each of us had a choice of incarnating or not. This is a story of incarnation. And the myth is trying to talk about a time before we are incarnate. There's no death because there's no life as we know it. There's no distinctions. So there's no good, there's no bad, there's no better, there's no worse. That's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we weren't eating that then. There's no doing anything. There's no building anything. There's no creating anything. There's no really loving anything. And the woman chose that. And what that really is, the feminine consciousness chose that, because the masculine consciousness would be making lists of this is the positive things, this is the negative things. The masculine consciousness was doing analysis. The feminine consciousness, I'm not talking just of being in a feminine body, but it is a feminine right hemisphere consciousness that knows, that sees, and that in this case goes, yes.